So what do people do? They have to look to somebody, and you say if they look for themselves.
For 30 years, Johnny Carson was the undisputed gatekeeper of American cool. A squeal and a desk slap from Johnny could launch a career into the stratosphere, while a lukewarm reception could signal its end. He was the master of effortless charm, but behind that suave Tonight Show persona lay a man who famously guarded his privacy and his standards with a razor-sharp wit. While Johnny was known for making his guests shine, not everyone who sat on that iconic multicolored sofa received the royal treatment. Whether it was a lack of preparation, an ego that eclipsed the hosts, or a simple clash of personalities, there were certain stars who made Carson's skin crawl the moment the cameras stopped rolling, and sometimes while they were still on. From legendary comedians who crossed the line to A-list actors who simply didn't get the bit, here are the guests who earned a permanent spot on Johnny's unofficial blacklist, including the one shocking celebrity whose behavior left the king of late night utterly fuming, Joan Rivers. For many decades, The Tonight Show was the primary ruler that every other late-night host was compared against. Under the leadership of Johnny Carson, the program was much more than a simple talk show. It acted as a high-stakes testing ground where a single invitation could start a person's career overnight, just as easily as a cold reaction could stop one from moving forward indefinitely. Every performer who walked onto that legendary stage understood the silent rules. They had to do a great job when called upon. They had to respect the natural flow of the room. And most of all, they had to stay on Johnny's good side. To go against him was to invite consequences that were quiet but lasted forever. No one understood this situation better than Joan Rivers. For 20 years, Rivers was one of the most dependable people to ever sit on that famous multicolored sofa. Since her first time on the show in 1965, she proved to be sharp, brave, and remarkably quick with her jokes, which helped her win over both the audiences and Carson himself. She eventually became a permanent part of the program, appearing nearly 185 times and building an easy connection with the host. There was a deep sense of trust between them, a fast way of communicating that only grows over decades of working together. Carson didn't just see Rivers as a regular guest. He saw her as a student he had taught and a favorite person whom he actively supported. It is exactly because of this deep bond that the events of the mid-1980s were so incredibly painful. On Friday, April 25, 1986, Rivers appeared on The Tonight Show for what would unexpectedly become her very last time. On camera, the episode looked like a happy party for the 21st anniversary of her first appearance, and it was filled with old memories as the two veterans shared jokes. Nothing in their conversation suggested the big changes that were already happening behind the scenes. But while Carson was celebrating a big moment, Rivers was secretly getting ready to become his direct competition. Just 9 days later, she was scheduled to announce The Late Show starring Joan Rivers on Fox. A brave and historic move that put her in the position of being a rival to the man who had helped make her a star. Even though her friends urged her to tell Carson herself as a matter of professional politeness to save their relationship, Rivers refused to make the call. Because of this, the news reached Carson through the president of NBC, Brandon Tartikoff, who reportedly had to prepare himself before giving the update because he knew he was about to hurt the network's biggest star. Carson felt completely shocked and betrayed by the news. His anger did not come from the fact that she took another job offer. He had supported other friends like Joey Bishop, David Brenner, and Dick Cavett when they started their own shows, but rather from the fact that Rivers had not talked to him personally. In Carson's world, being loyal was the most important thing, and her silence felt like she had completely broken that trust. The timing of the move made the situation even more painful. In the weeks before the announcement, Rivers had continued to talk with NBC and The Tonight Show about her future appearances, and she even discussed coming back as a guest host. All that time, she knew she was actually walking away. This level of keeping secrets was very hurtful, and as the show's producer Peter LaSalle later admitted, the whole thing was handled very badly. Lassley believed that if Rivers had gone to Carson at any point to explain the offer, Johnny likely would have given his blessing. Instead, the Salonists created a break in the friendship that could never be fixed. Then came the final move that turned a professional disagreement into a permanent war. After she announced her new show, Rivers tried to hire important members of the Tonight Show crew, including producers and staff members who had worked right next to Carson for many years. In his eyes, this crossed a line that should never be crossed. While competition was part of the business, stealing his team felt like a personal attack. Carson's reaction was fast and total. Rivers was banned, not just for a little while or for show, but forever. The message went far beyond her, as any guest who appeared on her program risked being kept off Carson's stage as well, a punishment that carried very serious results in the entertainment business. Rivers' show lasted just over a year before it was replaced by Arsenio Hall, but the damage to her relationship with Carson could not be fixed. Even though she later said she tried to reach out to mend the friendship, Carson never responded. They never spoke to each other again before he died in 2005. What had once been one of late night's strongest and longest friendships ended in a heavy, cold silence. There was no big public fight or an argument on TV, just a door that was quietly and firmly shut. In the world Johnny Carson built, once that door closed, it rarely ever opened again. Rich Little. For a while, Rich Little was a fixture on The Tonight Show, riding high on his razor-sharp impressions of Hollywood royalty. He possessed an uncanny ability to slip into voices effortlessly, a talent that endeared him to audiences and earned him a spot in the late-night inner circle. This arsenal famously included a caricature of Johnny Carson himself, an impression Little performed everywhere from smoky nightclubs to prestigious award shows, and even directly to Carson's face on his own stage. On camera, Johnny appeared amused, playing along with the bit as the laughs landed reliably. Behind the scenes, however, the humor began to sour. Reports suggested that Carson eventually grew tired of being the punchline. As Little's Carson impression became a stagnant staple of his act, the host's public tolerance masked a growing private irritation. There is a fine line between friendly ribbing and the sense that a guest is building an entire brand off your persona. And over time, that line blurred for Carson. What once felt playful started to feel repetitive, familiar, too comfortable. By 1982, the invitation stopped, and Little's frequent appearances came to a quiet, unceremonious halt. The reasons for this departure remain a point of contention. In his autobiography, Little claimed he was banned outright for mocking the host too frequently, while Carson's producers insisted the decision had nothing to do with bruised ego and everything to do with Little's material growing stale. Regardless of the motivation, the result was absolute. One of the show's most recognizable impressionists was suddenly persona non grata. In a twist of late-night irony, Little eventually found his way back into Carson's world through a different medium. He was cast to portray Johnny in The Late Shift, a dramatization of the industry's most infamous power struggles. After being pushed out of Carson's orbit for his impression, he ended up immortalizing the man on screen. It wasn't exactly reconciliation, but in late night, sometimes that's as close as you get to the last laugh. Bobcat Goldthwait. When someone talks about being on fire, they usually don't mean it literally, but on May 9, 1994, Bobcat Goldthwait took the phrase in a dangerously literal direction. Goldthwait had built his reputation on a foundation of chaos, fueled by wild energy and a persona that lived somewhere between reckless and fearless. While audiences tuning into The Tonight Show that night expected something strange, they certainly didn't expect real-time arson. Midway through his interview, Goldthwait suddenly doused his chair in lighter fluid and set it ablaze. For several stunned seconds, the room hung in a state of confusion. The audience laughed initially, assuming the flames were a scripted stunt, but the reality was far more volatile. As crew members rushed onto the set to extinguish the fire, the moment passed, but the professional damage was already done. The fallout was immediate. Goldthwait was arrested and ordered to pay a $2,700 fine, plus the cost of the ruined furniture. He narrowly avoided jail time only by agreeing to film public service announcements about fire safety. What began as an attempt at shock comedy quickly evolved into a legal and professional nightmare. To his credit, Jay Leno later extended an olive branch by allowing Goldthwait a brief, awkward cameo in a bit where he was buried in dirt, but that was the extent of the reconciliation. From the producer's perspective, Goldthwait was no longer an edgy comedian. He was a massive liability. The incident grew so infamous that it was eventually parodied on The Larry Sanders Show, featuring a fictional talk show pressuring Goldthwait to repeat the stunt for ratings. The joke resonated because the industry already knew the story by heart. While late-night television thrives on unpredictability, setting furniture on fire crosses into genuine endangerment. Once that line is crossed, there's usually no coming back. And for Goldthwait, that moment became a permanent footnote in late-night history, a cautionary tale whispered backstage long after the smoke cleared. Howie Mandel. While some performers find themselves banned after a single disastrous appearance, Howie Mandel's story is unique because, for a long time, he was actually one of The Tonight Show's greatest success stories. Having logged 21 appearances as he climbed the comedy ladder, Mandel earned a reputation as one of Johnny Carson's most reliable guests. He understood the rhythm of the couch and mastered the delicate balance between quirky energy and professional control. Everything, it seemed, was working perfectly. Then came appearance number 22. Mandel wasn't even originally scheduled for that night. He was brought in as a last-minute replacement after Sammy Davis Jr. had to cancel due to health issues. Instead of keeping the set simple and reliable, Mandel decided to swing for the fences by rolling out a 12-foot saber-toothed tiger prop. The problem was that the gag immediately began to spiral. The oversized prop became awkward to manage, the comedic timing collapsed, and Carson, who had no prior knowledge of the stunt, sat by visibly unimpressed. The segment never found its footing. The energy evaporated. The bit died right there on the studio floor. Carson notoriously loathed surprises of that nature, especially ones that hijacked the carefully curated flow of his program. Following that night, Mandel's invitations quietly ceased. There was no public feud and no dramatic announcement of a ban. Just sudden, absolute silence. While Mandel went on to build a massive, multifaceted career, that one misjudged stunt effectively ended his run in the Carson era. If there's one moment he likely wishes he could rewind, it's the night a giant fake tiger cost him his seat on late night's most coveted couch, turning years of goodwill into a single unforgettable misstep that quietly closed a very important door. Dana Carvey. As a breakout star on Saturday Night Live, Dana Carvey initially seemed destined for a long, fruitful relationship with The Tonight Show. His early appearances to promote the series were seamless. He and Johnny Carson appeared to click. The energy was high, and the jokes landed reliably. It looked like the beginning of a comfortable late-night alliance, but then Carvey did what impressionists do best. And just like with Rich Little, that is exactly where the relationship went sideways. The first crack in the foundation appeared with an SNL sketch titled Carsenio. In the bit, Carvey portrayed Carson as a desperate Arsenio Hall knockoff, painting the late-night legend as an out-of-touch veteran chasing a youth he no longer possessed. Carson didn't find the satire clever. He found it deeply disrespectful. The situation deteriorated further when Carvey doubled down, bringing a version of that same impression directly onto Carson's stage and performing it right to his face. That was the moment everything changed. Rather than argue or lecture, Carson simply shut the door. Carvey was quietly cut off, to the point that Carson refused to allow him back on the show, even to promote Wayne's World, which was one of the biggest comedy hits of the era. Because Carson was already nearing the end of his legendary run, the ban didn't last long in a chronological sense, but it was a telling glimpse into how he chose to spend his final year behind the desk. He didn't seek out forgiveness or offer second chances. He chose distance. For Carson, the impression wasn't just a joke. It had crossed into something personal. Once that line was blurred, even the brightest rising stars in Hollywood weren't spared from the permanent exit. Wayne Newton. While many celebrities wore Johnny Carson's monologue jokes like a badge of honor, Wayne Newton became the rare, volatile exception. For years, the rapport between them seemed effortless, as Newton made nearly 30 appearances on The Tonight Show, while his career ascended alongside Carson's nightly dominance. As magnetic, larger-than-life figures, Newton ruling the Las Vegas stages and Carson ruling the late-night airwaves, their paths crossed frequently, fostering what appeared to be a genuine friendship. However, by the late 1970s, this professional respect curdled into something deeply personal. The breaking point arrived when Carson began transforming Newton into a recurring punchline, targeting his appearance, his height, and most pointedly, his masculinity. As Newton later explained in a 2007 interview with Larry King, the betrayal was jarring because he had truly considered Carson a friend. On air, the host was warm and the laughter seemed shared, but behind the scenes, Newton had become a regular target of increasingly mean-spirited jabs. It eventually stopped feeling like comedy. Newton, confused and hurt, wondered if he had inadvertently caused offense, yet despite spending 18 months trying to clear the air through proper channels, the mockery only intensified. The situation worsened when the jokes began to spread, as Newton later noted that other comedians started piling on by repeating Carson's specific digs. To Newton, it felt as though Carson was genuinely angry, encouraging baseless narratives about his lack of manhood that carried no truth but significant sting. Newton wasn't interested in saving the friendship. He simply wanted the public humiliation to end. On Larry King's show, he candidly described Carson as a mean-spirited human being, suggesting that the host had a hidden history of hurting people the public would never know about. Fed up with being the focus of such negative attention, Newton decided to take matters into his own hands. After getting nowhere through official intermediaries, Newton walked straight into a meeting between Carson and NBC producer Fred DeCordova. He asked the producer to step outside and faced Carson alone. Recalling the moment later, Newton told Carson he didn't know what friend he'd killed or child he'd hurt to deserve such treatment, but he made his stance crystal clear. The jokes were to stop immediately, or he was prepared to settle the matter physically. Though Carson tried to soften the tension by claiming to be Newton's biggest fan, Newton refused to play games, insisting they straighten things out then and there. The confrontation worked on the surface. The monologue joke stopped, but the relationship never recovered. The rivalry deepened further in 1980 when the opportunity arose to buy the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. Newton outbid Carson and his partner, walking away with the property, but the victory was short-lived. Not long after, rumors began to circulate linking Newton to the mafia. These whispers grew so loud that Newton was forced to publicly deny them in the Los Angeles Times in 1986. He firmly believed these accusations traced back to Carson's influence, suggesting the entire narrative about organized crime emanated from Carson's reach and connections. The result was a full-blown publicity nightmare and a grueling legal battle. Newton sued NBC for libel and initially won a staggering $5.2 million verdict, the largest victory against a news organization in Hollywood history at the time. However, the win was overturned in 1990 by a federal appeals court, which ruled that the network's claims hadn't been proven deliberately or recklessly false. By 1992, the legal costs of the battle forced Newton to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Financial pressure haunted him for years, and in 2005, the same year Carson passed away, Newton was ordered to pay a substantial sum to the IRS. Despite these setbacks, he remained a fixture of the stage, rebuilding his finances through lucrative Las Vegas residencies. Ultimately, what began as a high-profile friendship devolved into decades of lawsuits and shattered trust, all sparked by monologue jokes that cut far deeper than any viewer at home could have imagined. Lola Falana. At one point, Lola Falana was everywhere. She had risen fast, first catching national attention as a singer and dancer on programs like The Tonight Show, then turning that momentum into a steady, high-profile run in Las Vegas. The crowds followed, and the tickets sold out, until, before long, she was being billed as the Queen of Vegas. Headlining night after night to packed rooms, everything was finally lining up for her. However, during one Tonight Show appearance meant to promote her Vegas engagement, Falana veered off the usual safe late-night script. Instead of sticking to light banter and easy jokes, she spoke openly about race and the bigotry she had experienced throughout her career. It wasn't a rehearsed or polished bit. It was direct and honest, and it caught Johnny Carson completely off guard. He wasn't expecting that kind of heavy conversation in a comedy setting, and as a result, the energy in the room shifted instantly. The timing of the appearance only made matters worse. Falana's residency happened to be at the Aladdin Hotel, a detail that quietly pulled her into Carson's ongoing and bitter feud with Wayne Newton. Suddenly, she wasn't just a guest promoting a show. She was standing on contested ground in a rivalry that had already turned ugly. After that night, Falana's appearances on The Tonight Show simply stopped. There was no public blow-up or dramatic exit. She just became another name that quietly disappeared from Carson's couch. While she continued headlining in Vegas for a while, still drawing huge crowds and commanding the stage, her relationship with late night ended right there. She was caught between the courage of speaking her truth and the misfortune of walking into someone else's unfinished war. Don Rickles. If there was one man who could insult Johnny Carson to his face and still be invited back, it was Don Rickles. Rickles wasn't just another guest on The Tonight Show. He was a controlled explosion. The self-proclaimed merchant of venom built his career on sharp, fearless insults, and no one was off limits. Not movie stars, not politicians, and certainly not the king of late night. Where most guests tiptoed around Carson, Rickles charged straight at him. He mocked Johnny's age, his multiple divorces, and his ego. He needled him about the show's ratings, the height of his desk, and the comfort of the couch. Carson was famously thin-skinned and could be cold to guests who pushed too hard, but he always let Rickles get away with it. Because with Rickles, the tension was part of the fun. The audience could feel the danger in the air. Rickles would lean in, fire off a brutal line, and Carson would respond with a slow, measured stare. A long pause, a tap of his pencil on the desk, and then a comeback just sharp enough to remind everyone who owned the room. It wasn't a feud, it was a perfectly timed rhythm between two masters. Behind the scenes, the respect was mutual and deep. Rickles admired Carson's incredible timing, and Carson respected Rickles's absolute fearlessness. They both understood their roles. Rickles never tried to truly hijack the show, and Carson never tried to dull Rickles' edge. That balance kept the chaos feeling like a comedy routine rather than a hostile takeover. One of their most famous moments happened in 1976 when Rickles, while guest hosting the show, accidentally broke the wood on Carson's cherished cigarette box. Instead of ignoring it, Carson found out the next night and stormed onto the set of the sitcom CPO Sharky, which was filming in the studio next door. With a camera crew following him, Carson barged in mid-scene to demand an apology. Rickles played along, acting stunned and defensive, and the audience loved it. It was the kind of spontaneous, unpredictable television that defined the era. Unlike others who crossed invisible lines and found themselves quietly banned, Rickles thrived in the danger zone. He could roast Carson without threatening his status, and he could insult him without undermining his authority. That distinction made all the difference. In a world where one wrong joke could close the door forever, Don Rickles kept kicking it open, and Carson kept laughing. But not everyone earned that kind of freedom. Because while Rickles survived by knowing exactly how far to push, the next name on this list learned what happens when power, ego, and network politics collide. Bob Hope. First on the list is Bob Hope. On paper, the relationship looked perfect. Hope appeared on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, more than 100 times, making him one of the program's most frequent guests. He was a comedy legend, a network favorite, and a staple of the era. But behind the scenes, Johnny Carson quietly grew to resent these visits. Carson hosted the show from 1962 to 1992, turning it into the most powerful platform in late night. He helped launch the careers of stars like Eddie Murphy, Jim Carrey, Jerry Seinfeld, and Ellen DeGeneres, building an empire on effortless charm and spontaneous wit. But Bob Hope was different. He wasn't just another guest, he was NBC royalty. Long before television, Hope had been NBC's biggest radio star. When he moved to TV in 1950, he produced massive comedy specials and maintained a deep relationship with the network well into his old age. To NBC executives, Hope was a legacy, the man who helped build the network itself. For Carson, this meant that whenever Hope had something to promote, he could essentially book himself on the show. There was no waiting or negotiating. A simple phone call was all it took. Carson had to accept it. Professionally, he smiled and played the gracious host, but privately, the situation grated on him. According to biographer Richard Zoglin, the tension was rooted in a struggle for power. Carson was the only star who could challenge Hope's influence, yet he was still expected to defer to the older legend. Carson resented how Hope could take over the show whenever he pleased, a reminder that while Johnny ruled late night, Hope still held unmatched clout within the network hierarchy. Beyond the power struggle, Carson simply didn't respect Hope's comedic style. Carson thrived on spontaneous banter and being quick on his feet, whereas Hope relied heavily on a team of writers. Once the script ran out, Hope struggled to improvise, making their segments feel stiff and mechanical. To Carson, Hope just wasn't a fun guest. As Hope aged, the appearances became even more difficult. His failing eyesight and hearing turned the interviews into a trial. Hope often couldn't follow Carson's questions, forcing Johnny to stick rigidly to prepared cue cards. If Carson asked something out of order, Hope might answer the wrong question entirely, killing the rhythm of the show. Carson had to slow down and carry the conversation almost entirely on his own. Despite this, the network continued to grant Hope access to the couch to preserve his legacy. Carson understood the politics and knew that while he was respected, Hope was treated like mythology. There was never an explosive confrontation or a public feud, only a quiet, growing resentment. Carson played the professional while Hope kept showing up, leaving one of late night's most powerful hosts to privately count down the minutes of every appearance. It wasn't exactly hatred, it was an obligation. And in show business, that can often feel much worse. Which name on the list shocked you the most? And did any of these behind-the-scenes feuds change the way you see Johnny Carson's legacy? Do you think he was justified in drawing those hard lines, or did some of these bans go a little too far? And if you had to choose, which guest do you think truly pushed him to his limit? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And click the next video on your screen. You're going to enjoy that one too.